Are you a Muslim who's married or looking to get married? I'm sure you've heard that more than 50% of Muslim marriages are ending in a divorce. Now that's unfortunate, but there's help out there. My name is Hina Mirza. I'm a registered psychotherapist with a specialization in Islamic counseling. And I've been working with hundreds of couples building healthy, happy, strong marriages. Sign up for the course that I just completed with Happy Strong Family to foolproof your marriage and make sure that you have all the right tools and all the right skills to lead a healthy, happy, strong life with your partner.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. We're going to talk about a very, very important topic that's called safety. Before we start, I would like to start with the praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All praises for Allah, to whom belongs everything that's on the heaven and on the earth. And to him is all praise. He is the all-wise and all-aware. And I would like to send peace and blessings on our Prophet Muhammad and his family, and as well as may Allah's blessings be on the Prophet Ibrahim family as well. So today's topic is divided into two essential topics that's to do with emergencies, what kind of precautions we can do to avoid that, and if we find ourselves into that situation, what we can do to get out of that situation. So we have a special guest with us, my dear friend and brother, Younus. He's the emergency response specialist, and I want him to just spend a minute to talk about himself. So let's get started.
Hey, Assalamu alaikum. So, what I do is that I help masjids and a lot of other communities, including synagogues, churches, temples, with their security and safety measures, right? And we also, obviously, I have a background in working in emergency response and risk management and safety within a lot of private and public institutions, right? So that's my consulting backgrounds from that.
I understand. So, I know it's a very broad topic because we both work for companies, corporations. There is a EHS department which focuses on environment, health, and safety. But when it comes to families, because today we are going to circle on families, like safety is not a very discussed topic. So I want to start with the first topic, that is precautions. So at home, we are with our families, we are with our kids, infants, grown-ups, adults, seniors. So how can we bring this awareness of safety to avoid any potential hazardous or situation that can lead to fatality? So can you talk about starting with our homes first?
Yeah, so I think one of the greatest things is to think about is mindsets first, right? So when we're driving, for example, when I'm driving my car here, right, I always put my seatbelt on. I'm always checking my blind spots, right? If I have a baby, I have to make sure the baby seat is secured and everything's locked in place. In fact, when you leave the hospital, they won't let you leave until you have the baby seat in place, right? So it's about thinking about checking your blind spots, right? It's about the mindset. So when it comes to at home, right? At home, obviously, it's when you least expect it, right? Things will happen that you don't expect. So the thing is, a lot of it has to do with the mindset of, okay, am I taking my precautions? And then having the mindset of, oh, if anything does happen, I'm ready, I have an action plan. Right. And sometimes just even at the most basic level, we have in the emergency management field, right, we have the idea of what's called a tabletop exercise. So
what is that?
So exercises and emergency preparation, right, they go through various different stages, right? You can go all the way from a very theoretical perspective where you're just working through and you're doing a brain teaser essentially, right, where you are going through the scenario in your head, right? And you're discussing with other people what were things that could come up, right? And then you could move all the way to, a full-blown emergency exercise where you're testing every single functional aspect of it with, police and, fire, ambulance, they're all involved too, right? So you can scale that down towards the home situation by, if there's a fire, how do we evacuate, right? And then what's the evacuation procedure? How many exits are in my home, right? And what do I do? Who do I talk to if the whole house is on fire, right? And obviously 911 is a big thing, right? But guess what? In North America, on average, it takes 5 to 10 minutes for emergency response personnel to arrive on the scene. So in the city of Toronto last year, Toronto police actually published I believe it was 2022 that they published their statistics. It took on average 18 minutes, I believe. I might be getting the specific one wrong, but it was 18 minutes to arrive at the scene of a priority one crime. Right, that's a life or death situation.
Yeah,
right?
I agree with you.
So the thing is that you have to, understand that, and that's not obviously an indictment on police. It's just that police resources have been really stretched thin in the last, 10 to 20 years, right? As the city has grown, right? So they just don't have enough manpower to cover everything, right?
Makes sense. So, Younus, I want to talk about. So now we are out of our homes, right? So you discussed a bit about police response, 9/11, firefighter. So imagine it's June the 6th, and in London there's a family who's walking down the street, right? So I know it's anti-Muslim and Islamophobia that someone decided to try to attack a very family who's part of Canada, who's part of this city called London. But what about families when they leave their houses? What are the precautions they can take to make themselves safe?
That's the June 6th one, right? The London van ramming, right? That was a very, very, that's a really interesting one in terms of like what could you have done, right? Because the reality is that there's actually, unfortunately, like with about 99% of these security and incidences where something's going wrong, there's a way to respond, right? There usually is actually quite a lot of agency on the part of the people who are the victims, right? So even, for example, during there's a incident in Las Vegas where there was a guy up in the hotel room, right? And even all the people who were getting hurt, right? In the concert venue, right? They were taking action, like running away, or they're evacuating people out, right? But with this, it's like such a sudden what do you call it? Sudden event, right? Like, what did this guy do? He just saw the family and then he basically drove straight towards them, right? At a high speed. Right. And I mean, what do we even know what warning signs they had? Maybe there was like something going on the curb. Maybe somebody, we don't even know if somebody horned or, did anything to warn anybody. Right. The reality is that's like a very, very fast reaction one. So that's one of those things where it's one of the rare instances where there's literally there's not much you could do. Now, obviously, when it comes to the specific around vehicles, so the government has a whole methodology around this, right? It's called hostile vehicle mitigation, right? So
what is this? Seems interesting. Hostile vehicle
mitigation. So it's HVM, right? So you can look this up. It's on Google and everything, right? So you can go to any government building, like a courthouse, you can go to even a museum or something, right? Do you notice that usually you have to take all these big stairs before you even enter the building? Do you notice that there's always trees? There's always nice little park benches and all that stuff, right?
I can notice. It's not on top of my head, but I will keep an eye.
So you might have seen that there's a lot of objects in the environment before you even enter the building, and there's a reason for that, right? It's because that's actually there to stop a vehicle from actually attacking the building. Maybe there's some sort of explosive in the vehicle. It's called a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, right? And that's actually more so than any other device or something. The vehicle itself is actually the most common weapon that's used on innocent people in Canada, right? And that's according to Dr. Barbara Perry from the Ontario Tech University.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So my next question is, first we started with the house, we moved to the streets. Yeah. Now let's talk about shopping malls. Let's talk about grocery stores. Let's talk about masjids. Like areas of prayers, like Canadians, what precautions they can take to be safe, what kind of things they need to look out for, what kind of instances should give them pointers that something wrong is going to happen. I know it's if it's sudden, but what kind of things they can keep an eye out instead of being blind. What can they keep on monitoring when they're in shopping malls or places of public areas here?
I do want to apologize. I forgot to mention one thing about that London thing, right? So the London attack, right? So one thing that people have mentioned about that specific, so some experts in the field have talked about that specific incident, right? One thing is if you're walking on the road like that, on the sidewalk. And remember, we're in an environment where, like, there's just not, against a vehicle, there's not much you can do, right? Like, I mean, you can obviously, if you have a little bit of warning, so if somebody's honking, right, to say, oh yeah, this guy's driving crazy, right, then maybe they could have taken evasive action. We don't know though, right? We don't know what they were doing. We don't know what was happening, right, at the time, right? One thing is, like, always walking on the side of the sidewalk where you can see oncoming vehicles, right? That's one thing. So that's something that a lot of experts have talked about. And also the city itself should be building the sidewalks in general in a way that there's a little bit of an elevation, so that if somebody is trying to hurt somebody like that, in that similar method, then they would at least get some sort of like, it would slow down. Yeah, there would be a bump, essentially a speed bump, right? It would slow them down in that sense, right? So that's one of the things. So your question, right? Your question is about how can people stay safe in their, in different environments, malls. Correct. Yeah. So, okay, one of the things is, like, okay, I like to use this example with missing children, right? So, like, let's just start with that, right? So a lot of times it's about, like, having an action plan, right? And when a child goes missing, right? It's like, it's horrifying, right? It's a very, very scary thing, right? So one of the things that people say a lot to do is actually taking pictures of your kids frequently is actually a great idea. Why? Because if the child goes missing, you now have a very recent picture, right, on that day, the specific condition, what clothes they were wearing, right? So that it makes it easier for the mall security and stuff like that to find the missing child, right? So that's there's the one thing, right? But, like, it's about the larger mindset of having an action plan, right? When you're at the mall, do you know where your exits are? Do you know where the nearest security desk or the front desk or even the bathrooms, right? Do you know where all those things are? And unfortunately, with a lot of these types of, incidences and stuff where people are trying to hurt other people, actually a vast amount of it is actually in shopping malls, in commercial spaces.
And why is that?
So, I mean, this is more of a United States thing, right? In the United States, obviously, there's a lot of these active incidences, right, that occur, right? I think, what is it? The statistic is something like once every 3 days or once every 4 days. There's a lot, right? And so what happens a lot of times, like, there's a lot of reasons for people to carry out that sort of thing, right, on civilian people, right, civilian populations, right? But unfortunately, what it is that those are actually very common areas. And part of the reason is because, unlike, say, a bank or a government building or, even a corporate office, right? Those areas are designed specifically around security. Only certain people are allowed in or out, right? Even a bank, which is sort of a semi-open public space, right, has somebody at the front desk, right? A universal banker, you'll call it, right? And that person's actually there to filter out, and they have mechanisms that allow them to, lock down, right, in case of a robbery or something, right? So the thing is, a mall is a very open space, very public. It's designed to allow people to come in, right? So with a shopping mall, it becomes a lot easier to carry out. If you wanted to do some sort of attack, you can carry out an attack there a lot easier, right? And things like, for example, even, do you know why in a lot of shopping malls now we have transparent garbage bins, right? There's a reason for that. It's because a lot of times in previous occurrences, there's been traditional garbage cans and an explosive is put in there, and you can't find it. So what happens is that the transparent garbage bins are actually there so that basically, if security finds out, sees that there's something that shouldn't be there, they can quickly inspect, right? And what happens is that because it's in a plastic garbage can, right, that's not transparent, what happens is that the explosive actually becomes more deadly because it actually there's more pieces to go around, more shrapnel, basically.
Makes sense,
right?
So I think in this way also the shopping malls or the public areas like mosques and other places are responsible for making like public announcements. Where they can keep, because what I noticed is I have been to Yorkdale Mall, Eaton Center, like virtually everyone, like the one just across us, Vaughan Mills, I think, if I'm pronouncing it right. So I noticed that there is a lack of like education. You just walk in and you just walk out. So there's no sort of public announcements. There's no sort of flyers given out. Like, do you think this is one of the ways to make people more aware about public safety?
Yeah, I mean, it's so. I think it is that these public corporations, right? They have, obviously, they need to, they need to be very stringent on a lot of these methodologies, right? Like, so for example, they'll actually have, I've been involved in, like, you know, some police drills and stuff like that at malls, right? And one of the things is that they have all these practices and trainings going on all the time, right? And they, like, you know, we don't see it, right? But it's happening, and they have a lot of infrastructure available for that.
Excellent.
Right?
Okay.
And I think that you know, the problem is that they run into an issue where it's almost like a conflict of interest, right? Where they can't, like, if they keep overemphasizing safety and security and stuff like that, people will think there's a problem. Right?
There'll be a fear around
Yeah.
going to public areas.
Yeah. So like, there's a hotel that I went to like a couple of years ago, right?
Okay.
And there was like 15 security guards at the front, and like, you know, I was, what's going on here, right? And as it turns out, it was a warning sign, because it was a symptom of a bigger problem, because it's a high crime area, right? So what happens is that there's a very delicate balance that they have to maintain, because if they're too secure, then people start questioning. It's like, okay, is this really a safe place for me to go? Right? It's like, it's almost like an inverse thing.
To be honest, I didn't think about that, but you have put it in the right perspective, that they don't want to lose business. They don't want to get the people, you know, going to other stores. So they just want to show sort of transparency, you know, people can just walk in and
Yeah.
there's no fear. Okay. So, Younus, I think you're talking about good things. I want to continue this discussion. And this discussion is my personal favorite. And I want to thank the podcast director, Kashif, you know, for bringing this topic up just before I jump on this podcast. Canada is now on the way of becoming one of the top destinations for car theft.
Yeah. That's not my specialty, but yeah, we can talk a little bit about it. Yeah.
So, you know, like, I'm also concerned. Like, I always, like, you know, dreamt about like getting a better car, bigger car, you know, to cater for bigger families, you know. But my fear has always been, I'm constantly watching these viral videos, you know, people coming in, sometimes even breaking into houses and going, and this is a nightmare for me. So can we talk about like what people must do if there is a public area, like we are next to Freshco or something, and they want to take the car or in their houses? So what should be the think tank of the person who's watching his car in public area or in his house getting robbed?
Oh man, that's a really complicated. So I'm definitely don't want to pretend to be an expert on this.
Okay.
Right. But like, there's a couple things I do know. Right.
Right.
But generally speaking, okay. So you're talking about prevention first, right?
Yes, prevention.
Okay. So one of the things is that it's interesting, because apparently there's a very specific subset of cars. From what I understand, there's a specific genres of cars that these thieves are looking for.
Lexus, Toyota.
Yeah, and what they do is that there's a whole like cartel, like I think you called it a cartel or something, right? And they basically ship these. I believe some of the most
Africa.
common countries are Nigeria and like Dubai and stuff like that. And they have ways of actually rubbing off the VIN number on the underside, right? And that's like, you know, that way it can't really be tracked at that point, right?
Okay.
So it's quite interesting. So one of the things is obviously, if certain cars are going to be targeted more, right? There's no question about it, right? If I have like a Toyota Land Cruiser or whatever, those are super popular these days, from what I hear, right? But the other thing is obviously a lot of the times there's a lot of these scams get run, right? So like somebody would pretend to need help or whatever, right? That will need you to get out of your car while it's still running.
Oh my God.
Right? That's one of those things, right? So you have to always be careful, right? As soon as you open the door, right, that gives them the opportunity to do it. And remember, so one of the things that we have to understand about criminals when it comes to theft,
Okay.
right? There's a very big difference between somebody who's trying to specifically inflict violence and somebody who's trying to steal stuff, right? Somebody who's trying to steal stuff, they want to do the least injury possible, least damage possible, because they know that the more damage that they cause and the more extreme the violence is,
Okay.
the more police resources are going to be put on it, right?
Right.
So let's say you're walking out to your car outside of the masjid, right? And I come, and I basically threaten you, right? And I threaten you, and then you basically just give up the car, and then I just leave with it, right? Or better yet, I actually have like a key, right, that mimics the signal that your key's giving, so I can unlock the car and get away with it,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
That's the ideal scenario for these car thieves, right? If, for example, you gave a struggle, right, and you fought back, right, but you were beaten up because there's like 3 of them, right, attacking you, right? What happens is that now it becomes an issue of this aggravated assault, maybe assault with a weapon, right? So now police, they prioritize that far more, right?
Interesting,
Because so criminals actually really don't want you to. They don't want you. They like smashing the window. That's gonna be a dead giveaway if police are looking for them, right? And it'll cost them, right, to replace that window, right? So we have to understand that there's a different in the threat environment. It's very different with that, right? A couple things that have helped. So I believe there's certain devices that these thieves are now using, right? That they actually slip under the car or something, and that helps to copy the actual code that the keys are using. I'm not an expert in this, remember, right? We just have to be cognizant of a couple things, right? Like, so, with your keys, right? Are you ensuring that, you always have them on you, that you're always locking your car doors, simple stuff like that? Because sometimes it's just simple things that lead to car theft, right? I remember that I was actually traveling in Vancouver, BC, a couple of years ago. And what happened was that, I was asking for directions in the mountain somewhere, right? And this man was basically just standing there, but he wasn't being responsive to stuff. And then he basically told me, yeah, I'm on the phone with the police. My car just got stolen, right? In the middle of the mountains, right?
Yeah,
Imagine.
That's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was passing through, so I couldn't actually help. He was near a ski resort, right? So he had the support, right, if you needed to go, right? But this happens a lot, right? There's been in Brampton and Mississauga. I know I've seen some videos of very violent, where they come with an axe or something, right? And they're trying to attack somebody with the car, right? Another thing, right, is that just remember that many of these vehicles with OnStar and these other services, they actually can track the vehicles down to the GPS location. So I know BMW for a fact they have some sort of software and they've had this for 20 years now, right? But they can actually track the vehicle, right?
Interesting.
And so reporting it to BMW, for example, would be so important, right? And I know that now that kind of technology has become almost standard, right?
Excellent.
They can track where your car is going and stuff like that. So that's one of the things, right, that you can do, right, is making sure that you have that number for BMW support, and do you know your license plate, because that's how they'll be able to track the vehicle, the VIN number as well, right? So these are things that you should know, right? Just having a folder in your phone with all this important information in case that happens, super critical.
Excellent. So I'm sure that the audience is really enjoying the aspect of precautions. Now we're going to move towards a much more second topic that people have in mind, what happens when the emergency response happens, the emergency befalls, God forbid, on a family, on a group of students, on a group of class, on a group of people enjoying their picnic. So my first and the most critical question for you is, what is the first action when there's an attacker and you are in that situation? What is the response?
It's funny. So at the beginning of my career, I was famously really, really bad at this, right? I would panic, completely shut down. I would start making lots of mistakes.
Okay.
Right. So I was actually the worst member in my teams and stuff. I was really, really bad. Right.
Okay.
And so obviously it took years and years of training and stuff like that to learn. I actually, went through martial arts classes. I went through a lot of different things to learn how to respond better, because I was just I was like, oh my God, it's when something bad happens, it's I have no control over my body, right?
Okay.
I can't, my brain's not thinking, it's panicking, right? The oxygen's going elsewhere, right? So what we have to understand is a couple things, right?
Okay.
When you are in an emergency, right? And your body, right? So first of all, one of the problems is recognizing the emergency. So if you see a lot of sometimes these things, right? A lot of people, when these things happen, they don't recognize that it's happening until a couple of seconds too late, right?
Okay.
So they don't recognize that it's a threat, because so there is a United States Army veteran, United States Army. He was formerly I forgot what rank he was, but he became a big consultant to the Army, called Jeff Cooper, right?
Right.
And Jeff Cooper developed a system. I can provide you the image from it. It's in our presentations.
Right.
So a system of awareness, right? So you basically have a white zone, which is what most people are at, which you should never be in, right? Unless you're sleeping, right? Which is you're totally unaware. You're just not even caring about this stuff. I'm just having fun. I'm living my life, right? Yellow zone, orange zone, and then red zone, right?
Okay.
And what happens is that, he always so these are kind of escalating stages of awareness where like, oh yeah, I see something of interest, I see that there's a threat,
Okay.
I'm taking steps, right? So like each one, so he always recommended that everybody should always be at the yellow zone, which is I'm just being aware of my surroundings,
Okay.
right? So when I walk into this mosque, I know where my exits are. The problem is that your animal brain, right? When something happens, an emergency, you only think of the entrance that you came in as a safe place because your body hasn't been through all the other exits. Right. So we've actually seen emergencies where people only leave the way they came in. They don't actually, they refuse to look at other alternative exits, right? Because I haven't opened a door on the side. I don't actually have my body doesn't recognize that as an emergency. And part of the training that we have to do is that, learning to guide other people through those doors. And it's by opening those doors. So return to the question of how to respond to an emergency, right? So yeah, training and practice really helps. Definitely people who play sports and stuff and have to train their reaction skills do better on this, right? Certainly people who have been through this stuff a lot. So if we see there's actually in 2019 or 2020, there was a Norway mosque where basically another incident like this was happening, right? Where somebody was coming in, right, with intent to harm, right? And it was a 65-year-old Pakistani man who actually tackled the person down, right? And and this was a young guy, right? So he's very strong, right? But it was an old uncle, right? And he was formerly from the Pakistani Air Force. Right.
Wow,
and so he tackled the guy down, and this is a repeated example, right? That older people who have the more experience and they've got more life experience, they can react to it. So if you, for example, right, it's funny because we live in an environment in Canada where everything's so easy and safe for us comparatively. If you go back to Pakistan, right, people are trained, right? They're ready to take that action. Same with India, right, or Bangladesh, right? Because they're in that environment where they have to make those decisions constantly.
But
so one thing is learning to breathe, right? So breathing, right? So our bodies go into fight or flight response, right? When there's an emergency, or it'll be freeze, right? There's two main things, but then there's also freeze if your brain gets overloaded with information, right? So learning to breathe gets the oxygen back in, so you can make decisions quicker. And the military calls it the OODA loop: observation, something else, and then decision action, right? And then you basically you think about what's important now, and then you run. So we'll discuss that in a little bit. But yeah, your next question?
Actually, I just wanted to touch base on that. So initially in your career, you were having a problem of getting into shutdown whenever there was a stressful situation.
Yeah.
So for people families who haven't faced yet, so the first step, what I understand, is start breathing again. Make sure that the oxygen is flowing.
Yeah.
And what other things they can do to better have decisions at that time. What kind of things are accessible, what can they do with the environment that they can protect themselves?
So there's actually one form of training that's really good. It's taking super cold showers.
Super cold showers.
Yeah, because what happens is that I'm not an expert in this at all, but it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, and it gets you to basically it simulates panic, right? A lot of times, and your body is literally having to.
I want to talk about this. Yeah. So when you enter that state of panicness, so what do we react? We breathe, and then what other things we can do with things around, or what things we can do to protect ourselves from an attacker?
So I've been in a couple of emergencies since then, and now it's interesting because it's become automatic. So it's kind of weird, but yeah, my recommendation would be breathe. Breathing is the most important. So they call it tactical. If your audience wants to Google it, tactical breathing.
Tactical breathing.
So that's a really good one to do. So basically, the idea is just breathe out, exhale as much as possible. Your nose will ingest as much oxygen as O2 as possible, right? That really helps, right? And then you have to think about the decision making of what's important now. So the police, they have a methodology, and it's called run, hide, fight in the United States. In Canada, because of sensitivity issues, they call it run, hide, defend, right? And what it is that it's the idea of what's so we think about, these are just options, right?
Right.
Any of these options could be right. It's not like you do one or you choose one or the other. You choose what's the most appropriate for a situation.
Okay.
So, for example, if something's going on in this mosque, you can run away. You can hide behind an area and conceal yourself so that you're not a target. And then you can fight back, right? And you can use whatever's in your environment, right? According to Canadian Criminal Code Section 25, right?
Excellent.
But the idea is that it's not just for that specific scenario. York Regional Police actually has talked about it being a more, so they've talked about it applying it even further, right? Which is doing it to any emergency situation. So if there's a fire, you can actually use the elements of that methodology towards a fire. If you've got a fire, if this room is on fire, guess what? We can run, right? We can try to contain the fire by making sure that all the doors are closed and putting stuff in front that's not flammable to slow down the fire, right? And then we can get a fire extinguisher or, like, back in the old days, buckets of water and try to fight the fire, right? If it's safe to do so.
Excellent.
Right?
Okay. So again, I want to reiterate the point. So once anyone is in a panic situation and he finds himself cannot make any decisions or has lost or what's happening, so first step is breathe, and second is run, hide, and defend. So try to keep on understanding these concepts, and when God forbid something happens, try to make sure you enforce these two things in your life.
I think well, just one thing to add to that, right? It's most like what it is that it's trying to think about, like how the police have described it to me is what's important now, right? That's how you have to describe it, right? So you have to think about, what's the one action that's important, right? So in a fire, it's okay, grab my family, get out of here. Right? So it's a very, very basic, right? And keep it as simple as possible. You don't have to get worried about the details, right? For example, individuals like myself, for example, we can get really caught up in the details, and it's really important just not to worry about that stuff, right? Just grab what's important, right? That's why. So I'll tell you, many kids in this country will have been raised on stop, drop, and roll, right? Where if you're on fire, you stop.
Okay.
You basically drop on the floor on the grass, and then you roll to put out the fire.
Okay.
Right. And so police have done that so much that it's become automatic for a lot of people to understand that. Right.
Yeah.
So it's very, very simple devices. Right. And, there's a reason why a lot of people know how to evacuate from a fire, because police and fire, the fire service has made it very, very simple. Right. Very, very, very straightforward.
Excellent. So I think coming to one of the difficult questions of today is that what happens when someone is attacked? Blood is coming out, or in the case of someone who has lost his breath, he cannot breathe. So I know, if you want to talk about CPR or you want to talk about something, so I want the audience to understand that if they see something that has already happened, now we are in the post situation where a person is bleeding, or a child cannot breathe, or a child is choking on something. So what does the parent, family, teacher, or a manager, whatever, what do I do in such a situation?
So it's really interesting. I think one of the things that we forget, right, is that I think there's a very big problem among not just the Muslim community, in general, Canadian society, right, where we have become conditioned that we always have to rely upon, the government or authority figures, right? So it's like, oh yeah, don't get involved with helping somebody if they're, choking or whatever, because I'm going to make the situation worse.
Okay.
Right? But you have to understand that if somebody is in such a serious injury, right? Guess what? Anything you do will improve the situation, right? Generally, right? If somebody's about to die, right?
Okay.
So one of the things that I like to do is I like to say, okay, guess what? We all use our phones all the time, right? What can you actually use in your phone that'll help you? So there's first aid apps that are for free. So Canadian Red Cross has a first aid app.
Canadian Red Cross, right?
St. John Ambulance.
St. John Ambulance, okay.
And there's quite a few smaller apps that made by different organizations similar to them, right? They're all great. Just go through each one, see which one works best for you when your brain is shutting off, right? But it's really, really simple, right? You can essentially, these apps are designed in such a way that when your brain's not working, it will give you the very simple solution to like different problems, right?
Excellent.
Whether it be like bleeding or it be, a broken arm, what to do, or, things like a heart attack, right? And so these things, what it does is that, like, many of us go to first aid training courses. I've been several times, right? And guess what? One weekend, once every 3 years, you're going to forget most of the things. And you ask most people who've taken first aid training courses only as a mandatory thing, and they forget a lot of the stuff. So this can be a great reminder, and it can be an instructor. So that's one thing. The other thing is that your phone actually can be programmed. So if I have set it up in my settings, in my advanced settings, right? If I press the power button 4 times, what will happen is that it will send out an SOS to 911. It will send out to 4 of the contacts that I've chosen like basically an emergency signal, and along with Google Maps location, and even video and audio recordings of what was going on at the time. Obviously, that might be for kidnapping, right? Very useful as well, but it's also useful for this stuff. And what will happen is that it's happened to me because I did it by accident, but basically police will actually call the phone and they'll be dispatching unless you tell them that it's a false alarm, right? Yeah. So that's like a really good thing, because you can quickly get somebody to your location, right? And guess what? If 911 is receiving several calls from one area about a situation, right, they're going to be, prioritizing that like area, right? So that's one thing, right? For example, with bleeding, right? Is really, really simple. Take a cloth, apply pressure. That's all you need to think about right now. And then obviously there's tourniquets and stuff like so Stop the Bleed is a online resource that you can use. And it was actually made in the United States. And actually even President Obama was promoting it at some point, because there were just so many of these incidences in the United States where people were not helping other people because they're like, oh yeah, I don't want to get sued, or I don't want to, I don't know first aid, right? So just really, really simple, basic stuff.
They're avoiding the people they don't want to.
They'll avoid, on the scene of a crime or whatever it is, right? They will literally just they'll literally stay away. And that person, easily preventable, right? Like that, you could have easily saved that person, but you didn't, right? And the main reason is because our culture, and so it's not just a Canadian thing, my apologies, but it's also like partly an American thing, because we hear these horror stories of people getting sued or whatever, right? So we think to ourselves like, oh, I can't do anything, somebody else will help. There's another effect, a psychological effect called the bystander effect. Right?
Bystander effect, right?
So it's what it is that in this room right now, there's a couple people, right? And if something bad were to happen to your eye, those couple of people would most likely come to help, right? But when there's a huge crowd of people, when there's like, 20, 30 people, guess what? Everybody expects that somebody else will step in. And the problem is that there's been overwhelming number of like incidences in the past where, because there's just so many people, everybody expects somebody else to step in because nobody wants to be in trouble, right? There's a really good TED talk about it where like it shows like this guy dancing in a park, right? And like he's considered weird, right? But then a couple people join him, and then all of a sudden everybody's dancing along with him. So everybody's dancing because now everybody doesn't want to seem weird, so they dance along, right? So it's just one of those things where it's very important to take the initiative in those circumstances.
Excellent. So I think it's very, very important for the families to understand this bystanding effect, the other topics that Younus has touched upon. Especially, I was very, very interested in when he mentioned about that pressing the power button 4 times. And I really appreciate that if anyone of you wants to know, please get in touch with Happy Strong Family, Younus, or myself, and we'll make sure that one of the comments on our Instagram or YouTube, we do detail or do like a short reel and exactly show you what's to be done. But we can do that offline for sure, and make sure that, if there's an emergency, at least they have the energy to press the power button 4 times. Like I'm a tech guy, but I was not really aware, that there was something.
Well, you have to make sure you activate it in your settings first, because it doesn't happen automatically. You have to so you have to make it's a pre-set preference, right? And then then it'll work anytime you want.
Excellent. So Younus, it was great talking to you, but I think the audience have some questions.
Yeah,
so
sure.
Let's just hear from Kashif.
All the hard questions. Great. I'm so good at this.
Yes, Jazakallah khair. So before we get to the questions, I just wanted to point out on Instagram, security.younus, so people can contact you. Alhamdulillah, I follow that Instagram account, and a lot of great tips are shared there, a lot of great information. So do follow it, and I think that's probably a way to contact you also in case someone wants to.
Yeah, that's the best way. So our team, we just try to push out as much useful information as possible, and then we sometimes we try to do analysis of current events as well, right? So that we just trying to help as much as possible.
And then now, just to expand a bit, because I don't know if we talked about when you say our team, are you talking about the SALAM Project,
Yes.
or maybe if you just want to talk a bit about that and let audiences know what that is, because I know you guys have done some amazing work in Toronto and I think across the country, right? So just a little bit of what it is and how can people contact them, especially masjids that might be looking for help.
So I mean, so here's the problem, right? The problem is that our team is actually, we can't really talk too much about like. We're like, I can't even say the names of the team members, right? Well, we can say so one of them is so one is Staff Sergeant Jamal Khan, right? He's former Toronto Police. He's actually the first Muslim police officer in Toronto.
Mashallah.
Yeah. And he still does training courses for Toronto Police, right? So he's one of our members, right? And then there's a couple other people like our founder and stuff, and they're all in the law enforcement and either military, in like some are like in army intelligence, some of them are in the security world, some of them are urban planning, right? My background is more in the emergency response and like private sector security and stuff, right? This is kind of our background. So our founder basically started this some years ago, and the idea was, it was actually after the incident in Quebec, and then the incident in New Zealand really kind of made it like an official thing, right? Okay. And it's kind of, think of it as a brain trust where all of us gather our combined knowledge and stuff, and then we try to provide it to the mosques, right? So that's doing drills, that's doing presentations. We used to be doing auditing, right? Everything we do is for free, right? We've never charged a cent. Somebody gave us a gas card. Madaniya Academy gave us a gas card once. That was really cool. But so the thing is that we do this. We've done it, I think 215 now, different trainings. Wow. Yeah. So and then our thing is very like we help churches and synagogues, temples, and like pretty much any organized food banks. We've helped a women's shelter before. Then we've also helped other charities and stuff like that, right? So yeah.
So I again, for the audience and for all of us over here, that let's just pray for Brother Younus's initiative, because they're doing everything fi sabilillah, and this actually really makes me very, very humble. Looking at how like I've known Younus for quite a time, and I've noticed that every other weekday, weekend, he's driving to remote locations, remote mosques, remote organizations, and providing these services. So please take a minute, just to make dua for him, his initiative, his family, and let's make dua that their initiative grows and more organizations, charities, and organizations engage in their training.
One thing I would actually really like to highlight, right, is that obviously we've helped this process, but it's not like we can give the consultation, we can give the advice, right? We can give the training, right? But really what's happened is that it's actually the masjids themselves that lend to certain people. So like Shafni Nalir at Toronto Islamic Center, right, and Brother Rafi Alam, right? And then very, very like amazing amount of work, Omar Al-Dahan from Dar Al-Tawheed and his team, right? They like, for example, those two locations, and then in the BC Muslim Association, Yusuf Siraj and Tariq Tayyib, right? Okay. What they've done is that they've taken what we've taught, right, and they've actually created like security networks and like intelligence. When we talk about intelligence, we're talking like, it's not like James Bond or anything. It's just that it's we're talking about like just if there is a threat at a mosque, if there's a suspicious person, it's being shared with all the local mosques, and we're being aware in case that person comes back, right? And just they've set up those networks. So the idea is like they need to, at the end of the day, right? In disaster management theory, we talk about like how there's a first responder, which is like police or fire, right? But there's a zero responder person there at the time of an emergency. Those people are by far in the literature, they're the most important when it comes to saving lives and stuff. And these guys are actually the ones doing all the hard work and actually, day in, day out, doing this kind of stuff where they're looking out for their masajid, looking out for their congregation. They're being very responsible. They're having those connections with other masajid, right? They're building, right? Like I know in BCMA, like there's 17 mosques now. in
Okay.
that network that are all
Mashallah.
sharing, and they've actually expanded beyond. They've actually they actually have a network now between in Albertan mosques and it's great. That's
Excellent.
really where the real dua needs to be made, is these people who are so busy already, but they're taking this time out and they're making the sacrifices for everybody's families.
Beautiful. I think one of the key points, takeaway from me and for the audience must be that let's try to empower our communities, our masjids, the organizations, non-profit, and let's volunteer, because all of this work needs volunteers, needs people to run the network, even anyone who wants to join Younus's team, please ping him, because everything is done fi sabilillah, it's like complete volunteering. So we'll encourage everyone who's watching this to please, participate.
Jazakallah. Thanks so much.
Waya. And
Okay, so yeah, we
Go
got a lot of
sorry.
comments and questions. So inshallah, we'll go rapid. So I'll ask one first on myself.
okay.
So
Where should I be looking?
you can look at me. It doesn't matter. You can look at me. I'm sort of
I'll look at
behind.
him.
People are just hearing my voice, so it's fine. You guys can look at me. But we see a lot of incidents of harassments that sort of go viral, and Islamophobic or non-Islamophobic people are getting harassed or thing. And as a bystander in that situation, like when the video goes viral, you see a lot of comments saying, "Oh, if I was watching this, I would have stepped in and punched that guy out." In my mind, I'm rolling my eyes, right? Thinking like, unless you're in that situation, and maybe that's not the smart.
No.
But as a bystander that's watching an active harassment situation, what should you be doing?
So one of the things that we see, right? So it's really interesting, right? There's actually a lot of these things that happen,
Okay.
but we don't actually get the viral aspect of it, right? Because what happens is that we know that criminals, like generally speaking, they're not going to want to do it in like a super public location, right? So we talk about that when we're trying to reduce threats, right? Like staying in public locations, right? And then being with family at the same time. Because guess what? An individual who's trying to do something, right, is not going to want to be seen by everybody else, unless it's very brazen. So
Makes
obviously
sense.
we've been seeing recently, like in the London subway with, am I allowed to say the Z word here? No, never mind. But like, we see this happening a lot, right? What happens is that they tend to pick on individuals, right, that they see as vulnerable, easy targets, right?
Interesting. Okay.
So to give one example, there was I believe a high school student. She was wearing hijab.
right.
She was on a bus, and as the bus stopped, somebody punched her in the back, and the guy just got off the bus because that was his stop, right?
Okay.
And other situations are that it's like, so recently we've been seeing, am I allowed to say the P word?
Let's go ahead.
Yeah, okay, sure. So at different protests for Palestine, right, that we see, right, what's happening is that obviously the enthusiasm of people has died down a lot, right,
Okay.
recently, right? So what's happening is that it's like several women and only one or two guys. And so what's happening at those protests is that a guy comes and is harassing all the women because he sees what he thinks are easy targets, right? And it's only because of one of the brothers who's there, just like one or two brothers are only there, because all the other brothers are like, they're done with doing protests, right? They don't step in to help out, right? So that's one of the things. So just having other people there as a presence is just so important. So not being alone, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to actually the harassments and stuff like that, right? If you're dealing with that, guess what? You can easily just put your body in front of that person in between the two people, and that will stop, right? So at the London subway incident that we're talking about, right? That I was talking about. This is London, England, by the way. So what happened is that these hijabis, I believe, were being harassed by somebody who said that he basically claimed to be part of the IDF, right? And he was harassing these women on the subway, right? And what happened is that a security guard tried to sort of break it up, right? But then there was another brother who came in, right? And he basically went in between the two people. And that's what got this guy to back down, right? Now, obviously, like just go, like putting your body in between, right? The two people, that'll be enough usually to stop, right? And remember, right? So the problem is that when it comes to the criminal code, I'm not an expert on this stuff, right? But generally speaking, is that when the person tries to lay a hand on the other person, that's when it counts as like assault, and then you have the right to defend yourself, right? So so these individuals, right, as soon as other people come and start like, putting a wall up to protect, right, in some way, even if it's just one person, that's what lets them back up. And this, I mean, I can't remember right now, but there's been several incidences where like, even like there's like, there's a couple of these people attacking, and only because one person stands up and decides like, hey, I'm not you're not allowed to attack these people, right? Those people just like basically back off, right? And we've seen this at a lot of specifically protests.
Interesting. I think a very important point shared by Younus. Please keep that in mind, and please always pray, for everyone's well-being, especially who are standing up for rights of minorities.
I'll tell you a really good one. Hang on, okay, so this is more of a robbery situation, but similar sort of vibe, right? So there was a woman in Pakistan who was going back home in the taxi, right? Okay. And she had her sister-in-law with her, right? And what happened is that the taxi guy actually was intending to rob them. So he pulled them to an alleyway. Okay. He took out a knife on them, right? And then there's two guys coming behind. It was a trap, right? So this woman slapped the guy in the face, right? And then the guy dropped the knife. He was so scared he ran off. And then before the other two guys could come in and close and finish the trap, this woman took her sister-in-law, and then they both ran off. Right? Okay. So all those principles in action: defend, run, right? What's important now, right? Okay. She was acting on instinct, right? So that's one of those things, right? Like you taking action is so important, and we see it like all sorts of people are doing that, right? Where they are taking that action when somebody's getting harassed.
No, I can feel the pain, like if he dropped his knife, I'm sure it must be a very nice and hard.
Yeah, then you'll become the victim, right?
Yeah. So, Kashif, go ahead.
Yeah, so some comments and questions coming in here. And for some reason, the integration on the live stream is not working, so I'm going to have to read them just from the YouTube chat.
Go ahead.
So, this is one great topic, mashallah. This is very interesting. That's another comment coming in. Another comment is saying, great job, Younus. Another comment is saying, run, hide, defend is very useful. We have to remember this tip. Yeah. Another comment is saying, stop the bleed is a program. You can invite a trainer to come to any gathering and they will teach you. It's a free program.
Yep. Perfect.
Another comment is saying outstanding questions and outstanding answers. There's another comment is saying wonderful. So another comment is saying stop the bleed is wonderful.
Interesting.
There's another comment here. So I'll get to some of the questions. As a parent, what advice should I give my child that has to walk alone back and forth to bus station for university or work, especially after dark?
Oh, that's a tough one. After dark, right? Okay, so in university campuses, this is actually quite a big problem. Okay. Right? So I know that York University and I think U of T as well, they actually have a system where like if somebody's feeling that they're not safe walking across campus or whatever at night, they can actually, there's a buddy system that they can use, have people accompanying them, right? Obviously, that's not going to be applicable to everyone, right? And so it's really important to understand what you can do, right? So the thing is, obviously, we've discussed already quite a few things about knowing what to do if somebody's approaching you like this, right? Being in public spaces that are well lit, that's always going to be kind of like the best thing, right? Additionally, right, there's items you can always carry on you. Now, you're not allowed to carry, so like a knife, right? I brought this for a reason, right? This is a multi-tool, right? Technically, you're not allowed to have a knife on you for the purposes of self-defense in Canada. It has to be a tool, like, a tool for a purpose, like opening boxes at the masjid. I personally I used my knife for gardening yesterday, to be honest, right? Like pulling out weeds and stuff, right? Good. So the thing is that all of these things, right? Like you can't, like there's limitations of what you can do, right? And if you're carrying them for self-defense purposes, right, that becomes very difficult legally, right? However, if you're carrying something that's in general, you were carrying it and then you use that, right? Because, somebody was attacking you or something like, in this situation that you're talking about, right? That's generally like police are not going to like be very lenient on that, right? In fact, in the Canadian Criminal Code, you're allowed to do whatever is necessary to stop a threat. So if I pick up, if Brother Muhammad comes at me with like a baseball bat or whatever, if I pick up this chair to defend myself, I'm totally allowed to do it. And in fact, in most circumstances, the chair will actually win against most weapons.
I
Right?
understand.
An umbrella, a walking stick, your backpack, right? Your jacket itself, right? That can actually be used to stop the stuff like that. In fact, a lot of flashlights. So flashlights, I get made fun of this a lot by my bosses and stuff, but flashlights, right? They're actually quite useful. And in fact, if they weren't useful, the military wouldn't be putting it, wouldn't be using them, right? For their interrogations and stuff, right? So the thing is that tactical flashlights,
especially
they're designed specifically like if there's a situation where you'd be in. Now, obviously, you're using the flashlight because it's dark, right? You're out in the night, right? But these flashlights can also be used in that situation, both to stop a knife and also because the light is so blinding that it'll make somebody pause if they're trying to do something to you.
No, I think that's a great takeaway. Like also you can put the torch on a SOS mode. It keeps on having a frequency,
Yeah, and that's very disorienting to people, right?
Excellent.
So there was another question, but I think you answered it. So as a woman walking alone, do you recommend any particular items legal that one can carry? So I think
umbrellas, walking sticks.
In one of your posts, I saw steel water bottle.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Sorry, I totally forgot that one. That's a really good one. Steel water bottle. So I mean, you have a water bottle, you need to drink from it, right?
Yeah.
And so the thing is that if you look, we have to make sure, I want to stress this point. We're not saying to carry weapons and stuff like that. You have to be super armed or anything, right? But the simple idea is that if you've got an object in your environment, you use it in an improvisational manner to defend yourself. And that's totally fine within the law, right? So you're allowed to use whatever is necessary. So yeah, a steel water bottle is great because, it's nice, heavy. If you fill it with water, it's even heavier, right?
Yeah.
And think about it, right? So I've got a knife out here, right? And I'm this is kind of the standard length, right? Maybe the knife is bigger. Let's say it's a really big knife, right? That somebody's attacking you with, right? Guess what? A steel water bottle is bigger than that. And actually, because it has so much surface area, it's more likely to actually just break. Yeah, and it's actually it's likely that the person will actually lose grip of the knife, right? If that comes to that, right? But the problem is obviously you should never try to get into a knife fight. There's actually in martial arts they talk about it basically if you get attacked by a knife, expect to get cut, right? And it's very difficult to not, because it's a knife is actually even faster than a gun, right? So you can keep stabbing and stuff like that, and it's very easy for somebody to use that. So always running is always 100 times better. And actually what's good with running is that you can change your environment and modify the circumstances to your advantage, right? So that might mean going to an area that's more populated where people can, see that, oh yeah, there's a person chasing them with something, right? Or you can go to you can obviously find a place to hide, or get into an environment where you have higher ground or something like that, right? Or more areas to block, right?
Yeah, you know what? For a person like me who always skips cardio, I think it's very important.
That's why I ran on the way here.
Yeah. So tip number, is stainless steel bottles and all. But the most important thing is your fitness, your health. Number one, just make sure you're doing your cardio. You have the stamina to just evade the situation, as far as you can.
But it gets more complicated when we talk about people with disabilities like wheelchairs, walkers, walking sticks, right? So we always have to be cognizant. So one thing that Dean Support Services talks a lot about is the accessibility awareness, right? So we have to always be understanding that none of these things work out perfectly in real life. There's a famous saying, no battle plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So a military can make all these plans and stuff, but it's not going to work out in real life because there's always things that go wrong. If you plan a wedding, exactly this is exactly what happens, right? So you somebody with disability who might also be in trouble, you have to be ready to take action and be flexible, adaptable to that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a big giveaway. To be honest, just a minute before you talk, I never thought about disability, someone's handicapped, So I think that brings a very nice angle to it, opens up a bigger, wider topic, and I think, as you mentioned, Dean Support is already tackling that awareness aspect.
Yeah. I think you should really look at their stuff and take a look at their resources and stuff. But they're really trying hard, but there just needs to be more about it in general. And they've actually developed standards and regulations that are now within the country. They're actually used as a formal thing for mosques.
Beautiful.
So on
go
the
ahead.
topic of like what can you carry? There was sorry, I'm trying to find the
Oh,
question.
everybody listen. Oh, by the way, no pepper spray, guys. No pepper spray.
Okay, so that was the exact question. What are your thoughts on pepper spray? We see it on the movie. As far as I know, it's not legal to carry pepper
Not
spray
legal in Canada.
right?
So bear spray and dog spray are legal, and they're very similar compounds. However, that being said, bear spray is for in a situation where you would encounter bears, right? So the thing is that, yes, I know in certain areas of York region, like North Newmarket and like East Gwillimbury, yes, there have been bear sightings once every 10 years,
Okay.
right? But the idea is that somebody in the wilderness would be using bear spray. However, in an urban environment, yes, you'll be running into dogs. And you might need dog spray in case. So that dog spray is actually legal in Canada for the purposes of fending off dogs, right? Now, the person who attacked Dar al Tawhid with an axe,
Okay.
and 2 years ago in 2022, right, and had like pepper spray, like he had bear spray, right, with him, right, and that was legal for him to buy. Pepper spray was not. Right.
Right.
So just imagine that he sprayed it all over the mosque. The compound was so intense that everybody in the masjid area
That's
was
terrible.
like blind, like they were cuffing, they could barely see. So it's a miracle that, subhanallah, it was an 18-year-old brother and 60, I think an older brother, 60 years old.
Okay.
They're the ones who tackled this axe guy down. But like, somebody could have been seriously hurt.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine. If it's such a toxic fume, that
Yeah.
you start losing your sense. It's
So I'm actually allergic. So I have asthma, right? So what happens is that I was there 1 or 2 days after, right? I was there on the day of and then a couple days after, right? And you could still breathe all of the residue from the bear spray. You could, like, it was still choking people up, right? And like while we're in the first stuff and stuff like that and doing salah and everything, you could hear everybody coughing.
yeah, that's terrible. Go ahead, Kashif. Do we have?
Yeah, we have a lot of comments coming. So yeah, amazing topic. One is saying amazing lessons, brother Muhammad and brother Younus. Keep up the good choices of guests. A lot of thumbs up, a lot of hearts, a lot of love being shown. So mashallah, may Allah reward both of you for all your efforts for the community. There's there's more questions. I don't think we'll get to all the questions, so people can reach out. We've shared contact information on
Excellent.
Instagram. You can.
Yes.
There's a few that I did want to touch upon. We're past the hour, so we'll have to sort of do these.
Okay, I'll do them.
little bit-
I won't stop being so chatty.
No. Yeah, so the first question is, what advice do you have for large public gatherings like protests? Like, how do we keep safe in crowded situations?
Oh, crowd control. Okay, that's going to need a whole other podcast. There's a whole history behind that. Hillsborough Stadium crush. You should look that up. The Hajj. Every couple of years, there's sometimes an incident like that.
Okay.
Are you talking about crowd crushing, like people being compressed?
Yeah, like big crowds.
stampede.
Like as a family, I'm taking my kids to a big crowd where I'm going to be in the middle of a lot of people. Like, what's the safety
dear.
precautions?
That is a very serious concern. It's a whole separate training now that we have
Interesting.
for the masjids, because crowd crushing and what we call stampedes in the media, right? They call it that because it sounds more like, I don't know, it sounds better to them, but it's technically a crowd crush when everybody's in a compressed area
Okay.
and they're asphyxiating and stuff like that, right? So
Oh my God.
there's a couple, really quickly, I'm going to do a couple mitigations, right? So typically speaking, this is very common at concerts. Right,
Okay.
like Taylor Swift, Rocky, what was ASAP Rocky, whatever his name is? I forgot. There's a bunch of them. Travis Scott. That's the one. That's the one, right? So these are really common at concerts where everybody's jumping around, and the concert organizers, they actually overbook, right? So it might be like, for example, 10,000 safe capacity, but they're booking 13,000 because they can fit that many.
insane.
That's
Yeah,
thousands more dollars. There's millions more dollars, right? So simple things, right? So for example, a doorway, right? You want to make sure that if everybody's exiting after Jummah prayer or Eid prayer, right?
Okay.
You have volunteers standing in front of the doorway, in front of a choke point, to slow the flow, right? You're trying to slow the flow so that there's less people going into the very congested area,
Okay.
which is typically the shoes or the slippers.
That's correct.
Within a masjid context, for example, you want to make sure every single exit is open and easy for people to exit out of. You don't want people. So the best thing about security principle: one entrance, lots of exits.
Interesting. That's a
Right.
great point. Yeah.
So make it easy for people to exit, but when it comes to entering, you obviously to reduce the possibility of a security threat, and also reduce the amount of people coming in. Right. If you're being actually crushed, you have to take. So this is actually used in some martial arts as well. You actually have to keep your arms close to your elbows and your elbows close to your chest. And what this does is protects your rib cage from getting compressed.
Interesting.
Right. And what happens is that you do not fight against the crowd, because what will happen is that when everybody's compressed like this, they become like a jelly. Right. And so you don't actually have that much control, and you'll waste too much energy trying to fight back against the crowd.
Wow.
Just let it go. Right. And then try to slowly slip your way out of the crowd, away from the areas where it's getting super compressed. And what happens is that people don't realize oftentimes until they're too late. Right. And you can have people on top of each other crushing, and like they're losing oxygen. Yeah. And so if you want to look at some of the more academic literature, there's been a lot on the Hillsborough in London, UK. That was a soccer match that went really, really wrong.
Okay.
And actually it was so bad that one of the police captains or something, he basically told everybody to not write anything in their pocketbooks, not take any notes during the event, because they wanted to hide it. Obviously, all the police, they started writing down because they needed to document it. There's a recent one in South Korea where I think about 80 people died. And that was some pop star, and then everybody was during Halloween, and everybody was crowding in like an alleyway.
Oh, I know that was a K-pop, like
in Seoul, I think. Oh no, sorry, I don't know. I've forgotten the actual place. But yeah,
go ahead, Kashif.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so then I'll take two more questions here, and then so important. Can you please shed some light about the subways? Because a lot of our audience is for Toronto. It seems zero security in those areas, and we have seen drunk people and people with sharp things. So what about subways, public transit? What advice do you have?
I'm on the subway often, so it's definitely So obviously, always stay away, and like TDC and Toronto Police actually work very closely together. So like as soon as you see something, like they have all these alert signs all over, because they want you. They want you to be as aware as possible to immediately call police and stuff, right? Because a lot of times, it's somebody who's like drunk or intoxicated, and they've got like, sharp objects, right?
Yeah.
And they're not like, they might be having mental health issues, right? So they're not in that state of mind. So, being as far away as possible. The good thing is that there's usually a lot of places to stay away from that, right? So just keep your distance as much as possible. Obviously, if somebody's getting hurt, if you want to intervene, Younus,
it's very tough. Like as a new immigrant, I can tell you one thing. I was an avid user of TTC for downtown, but the last time I went with my kids, they just jump over the fence. They enter and you know what? I have boycotted TTC, from at least 3 months.
Oh, wow.
Because when I went 2 times to downtown. I had some work to be done, and I really got so chilled that I had to really pull my wife and kids and move them from one place to one place, because these people just jumped over the TTC barriers, and they were running wild. And again, the horror that Kashif shared, what if there's someone in subway?
Yeah. Well, you were doing your job as the family protector, mashallah.
I was just pulling them to different locations. Yeah.
No, but that you're doing it, right? So that's the thing, right? Like that's the important thing, that you have the mindset, right?
Okay.
And that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, right? There's so many things out of our control, right?
But Younus, my fear was I didn't want to confront. Like I faced at least 3 people, but I was just trying to avoid eye contact. I was just trying to avoid
So be as avoidant as possible is exactly the right thing to do. If you have to take a slightly longer route, go for that, right? Like if you have to go around that person, right? If it comes to that person tries to confront you, which is happening on the TDC, all sorts of crazy things happen every hour, right?
Okay.
Guess what? Like learning to stand your ground is actually quite important, because a lot of times these people are looking for easy targets.
Okay.
Right. But at the end of the day, so we won't have time to cover conflict de-escalation, but one thing is delaying people. And getting somebody else to call police. So in a masjid, when you have a suspicious person, we say 3 people approach, one person asks questions, delays as much as possible, listens to the person, right? Other people are taking notes or calling police, right? Excellent. So that's one thing, is using conflict de-escalation. We don't have time to cover it right now, but asking questions, listening, empathy.
Yeah, no, I have a very bad, from with TTC, especially the one that I loved so much, I just stopped, unfortunately. Go ahead.
It's hard,
TTC, maybe you're riding the subway off hours, it stops, you see 2 carts, one is empty, one has maybe a handful of people. Which one do you get on?
Yeah, exactly. So obviously with more people, right? That's generally better, right? Never, yeah. The more public the thing is, it takes a lot more braver people to go attack,
Overcome.
you know.
And then the
Go ahead.
final question, inshallah, I think it's a great one for all families and individuals. First aid kits, what would you recommend should be in them? Should families have them? How many should they have them in the cars?
Good.
And what makes a good first aid kit? Any records when it comes to
Oh,
that?
you know what? This is a great question. Actually, do you see my wallet right next to your hand?
Yep.
Yeah, just pick it up. So inside that wallet, I have actually gone to Dollarama and gotten a bunch of bandages.
Okay.
And yeah, so here's the thing, right?
Interesting.
We talked about first aid a lot. So it's as simple as going to Dollar. This is a receipt. Don't mind that. It's as simple as getting bandages from Dollarama and having them on your person, right? And
Okay.
literally, look, I mean, I'm keeping a little bit of cash in here, but I also
Okay.
keep some bandages, and they don't take up much space, right? That's one of it. Building your own first aid kit is always usually better.
Okay.
You can get the supplies from Dollarama or whatever.
Okay.
You can purchase first aid kits themselves. In the emergency management context, we actually like to talk about a 72-hour preparedness kit. So
Okay.
in emergency management, it's like you should have a go bag that's actually ready for a large-scale disaster for 72 hours if your family has
Okay.
to survive. A first aid kit is also a really good step towards that. So having them in your car is great. I used to actually have a first aid kit that I would bring around to all the mosques,
Interesting.
and I lost it. So I have to, have to build it again.
I understand.
So that's one thing, right? And it's really simple. I mean, you can do it in maybe 1 hour, build the entire thing yourself.
Mhm.
You can also there's also some first aid kits you can just purchase from like Shoppers Drug Mart or Canadian
Interesting.
Tire, right?
Yeah.
So those are all great. Honestly, the problem is this: the thing is, having a big first aid kit is really great, but if you're not going to carry it around with you, and it's it's stuck somewhere at home in the basement or whatever, right? Then it won't be as useful. What's easily accessible to you is what's most useful. So if you can get a more portable first aid kit,
Interesting. Yeah.
right, that's usually a better step. You don't want to over prescribe stuff to the point where it's too difficult to follow. So my recommendation is that either build a small first aid kit, maybe the size of your wallet or something, has the Tylenol and stuff like that, some basic stuff that's really good, disinfectants, right, and bandages. That's really good stuff to start off with.
Inshallah.
Maybe a tip I'll give, and you can sort of
Yeah.
confirm or deny it. Like, people build these first aid kits, but then they forget about them. But then 3 years later, it happened to me, and everything sort of like dried up and stuff. And
Yeah.
So
Refresh them.
how often should you be sort of refreshing or checking your first aid kits? Or
So I mean, I check I when I had mine before I lost it the other month, I was checking it every month or so, right? So just checking the stuff, the supplies and stuff like that. It's just basic stuff. You have to think about it like brushing your teeth or whatever, right? Or
Yeah.
checking your car oil, right? The engine oil, right? So
I think, Younus, let's just find some day, let's both walk into a Dollarama and let's do like a tutorial, how to do like a
Sure,
first aid
sure.
kit, So
Yeah.
if anyone wants to see me and Younus go to a Dollarama and do like a first aid kit,
okay, we could do
please
that.
put a comment, and inshallah we'll team
So
up
I
with.
just wanted to cover. I'm not like a first aid professional, like a medical
Okay.
professional, whatever. So this, but I like the thing is this basic stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, we can totally cover it. But the more like wound trauma and stuff like that,
Yeah.
I would recommend you bring on a nurse or a doctor or whatever. But that's really good. There's some medical people that are like fantastic at this. But yeah, we can definitely do the Dollarama thing.
100%. Yeah, I started off with CPR, but we didn't really get a choice to go into CPR, how it can be done. But hopefully we can.
In the
Yeah,
future.
in the
That's
future,
that's
inshallah.
and that's not medical stuff is not my specialty. That's why I say things like stop the bleed and first aid training, because that hopefully will give you guys
Excellent.
how to do more research on your own, basically.
Interesting. So Kashif, go ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
So Alhamdulillah, I think we are good with the questions. We had a lovely discussion, to be honest. It was an eye-opener for me as well. I thought I knew a lot. I read a lot, but Alhamdulillah, we learned everything from the professionals. And I would like to again thank you, Kashif, for some of the questions were added last minute. It helped in flowing the discussion. As a tech expert, also, I want to add some points, and I just want to make sure that Kashif and Younus agree with that or they disagree. So there has been a lot of talk about using AirTags and Samsung tags, for car thefts.
Great. Yeah.
So what came to my mind is that if there is someone who's walking alone, after hours, I would request them to just with consent of their daughters or sons, put a tag with them, like a Samsung tab. I'm a Samsung fan, fanboy. So.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I noticed that also works is Meta. They have great apps, WhatsApp, Instagram. So WhatsApp has this live location, so you can keep on monitoring your kids walking from one point to point A to point B. So inshallah, if this can be beneficial to the families who ask this question, invest in a Samsung AirTag or just use WhatsApp location.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, these things are great. I really recommend them.
Alhamdulillah.
Also, like having security camera systems in your house, stuff that's accessible by phone. And they come now with motion detectors inbuilt. So
Excellent.
if somebody is in your area, you can actually see on your phone, oh yeah, what's going on at home, right? So it's you'll get alerts and stuff, right? So like, yeah, these are all great. I love like the technology aspect of it. Like it's getting more advanced and we're allowed to
Yeah.
see more, right?
Yeah, no, because it came to my mind because for wallets, I do keep it all the time somewhere, So for me, I thought, okay, AirTags. But now when Kashif asked, I was like, okay, so if I'm looking for my wallet, I can put like an AirTag. Why don't we just give an AirTag to, someone who's vulnerable, someone who's going through a difficult journey or through a rough patch, and the parents can be confident that, the object is actually like the person is actually coming towards the final destination.
We have had, so I mean, the most extreme example of this is actually Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, right? That went missing, right?
Yes.
And it's only because of the black box data that it's because of that flight that in the airlines, they've actually completely changed everything where there's like much more mandatory tracking and surveillance of aircraft and stuff like that, because they don't want the whole plane went missing years ago and they still haven't found any evidence of it, right? Or that we know of, right? There's a reason, so they have installed all those things, those regulations now that you have to have more frequent communication and more frequent tracking and surveillance, because guess what? You don't want to have a plane going missing. So this is great. This is great advice, right?
Sounds good. I'm not sure if the tags work 50,000 feet above, but I'm sure they have a robust system.
I mean, it's the same concept.
I'm just kidding. I'm just pulling your leg. So again, I started with praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sending the blessings on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I would like to conclude with thanking Happy Strong Family for giving us such a beautiful platform where people with great experiences, backgrounds can come and talk. And I really hope that inshallah we can come again, talk about some topics that we couldn't highlight today with the crowd management or with some other topics that we discussed. And I also end with the same, thanking my host, my friend Younus for such a wonderful time. Kashif, taking care of the questions, comments, and the setup. And Happy Strong Family, may Allah bless this initiative. And again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.